Hello, I'm Kristen. I'm the director of the Island Free Library here on Block Island. Welcome to Frankenstein Tea. Today is Tuesday, June 30th. Is that right? Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday, June 30th. I think it's the last day of June. You know, there's some childhood rhyme we know about that. Some people do it with their knuckles too, those months and 30 days and 31 days. Anyway, I think tomorrow is July 1st. So I'm not sure where June went. It was Memorial Day and now it's July, as is typical on Block Island. That leap from Memorial Day to July is often quite a blink of an eye and nothing more. And so here that has happened again. We are in phase 3 of reopening Rhode Island, according to the governor. That started today. The update from Rhode Island Library State Offices was not much is going to change for libraries in phase 3. Not much changing at all. So we just had our outside open hours and they were busy. So people are getting turned on to what we're doing out there and enjoying it and appreciative of it. So I encourage you to come down and check us out, see what we're doing. We did it at the front door, and that's adult services. And then we have Miss Morgan, our youth services librarian, at the children's garden takeout window is what we're calling that. We literally crank open a window and it's a big floor, almost to ceiling, almost to the floor window. So, we're right there. We're accessible. We pass things out the window. You can come get things from us. Today was the first of our Take and Make Tuesdays for kids and their families. And we handed out brown paper bags of crafts, everything you needed to do this craft and take it home and do it. And that was a big hit. And, we kind of park strategically now, like the staff parks in a certain way. And we have a picnic table out there and some potted plants. And so we've commandeered some of the parking lot. And kids are drawing on chalk, and we have free books out there. And the Take and Make special for today, we have a picnic table, an umbrella, and some furniture. It's very sweet, very, very sweet scene out there, as is the front yard, where lots of people are getting their work done. Lots of their library needs are being met. And we're going to keep at that. We will do that for the month of July. We'll see what happens in August. But for the month of July, while the rest of Rhode Island figures out what feels safe to them and what is safe for them to do, we have determined that we will remain with only outside library services. But again, don't let that discourage you. We can do everything that we do. We print, copy, fax, scan, email, notarize. We help with readers advisory. We do checkout. We do check-in. We tell you we're visitor center number 2 of the island, answering questions. The Wi-Fi is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no password, easily accessible. So we're doing it. That's how we're doing it. And that is safest for our community and for ourselves. And so we're going to continue doing it that way. That means that we're going to continue doing our online programming virtually, or I guess that's the same thing, our programming online and virtually. And we're adding to that tomorrow. If you're interested, we have reconnected with our memoir participants, and memoir is starting tomorrow at 1 p.m. You can send me, Kay Bauman at islandfreelibrary.org, your email if you'd like to participate in memoir. It is a group of people that get together and work on their memoirs, and they are led by Gloria Redlick, and she and the Senior Advisory Committee have partnered with us to bring that program to you through Zoom meeting. And so that happens tomorrow. And we have some other virtual programs happening throughout the month. So stay tuned. This program will continue. This is Frankenstein Tea. This is a chance for you to sit back and relax, have me read you a story. You can watch this live. I am live. It is 3:06. I am in the library. This is me. I'm not a puppet. Here I am. You can watch it later. You can watch it tomorrow. You can rewatch it. I'm just happy that you're here and being exposed to a wide variety of literature. Yesterday, I read some nonfiction. I'm going to read a little bit more nonfiction today. Frankenstein Tea is usually a short story. I haven't read too much nonfiction, but it being June 30th and June being Gay Pride Month, and I have done nothing for Gay Pride, I am going to read a classic here, Audre Lorde. She is a self-declared, she has now passed away, self-declared Black lesbian feminist, is what she says. I want to make sure that I get that in the right order because she's pretty specific about that. Black lesbian feminist, Audre Lorde. She's pretty famous. You might know Audre Lorde. I could have read several things from this book today. I started in this book today, this anthology of women's lives, because I knew she was in here. I could have read this great stuff in this book about her, but then this book was in our collection. This is a library book. This book is called A Burst of Light and Other Essays by Audre Lorde. A Burst of Light and Other Essays, Audre Lorde. I think it's like copyright 1988. And this edition is 2017. And it's Dover Publications. And I'm reading in honor of all lesbians and all gays on the last day of Gay Pride Month, which means, of course, we're always proud, but is a time to recognize and celebrate gay lives. I am reading Turning the Beat Around, Lesbian Parenting, 1986 by Audre Lorde. These days, it seems like, oh, is this what I'm reading? Oh, hold on. Is this the one I'm reading? Yes, this is the one I'm reading. Turning the Beat Around, Lesbian Parenting, 1986. These days, it seems like everywhere I turn, somebody is either having a baby or talking about having a baby. And on one level, that feels quite benign because I love babies. At the same time, I can't help asking myself what it means in terms of where we are as a country, as well as where we are as people of color within a white racist system. And when infants begin to appear with noticeable regularity within the gay and lesbian community, I find this occurrence even more worthy of close and unsentimental scrutiny. We are lesbians and gays of color, surviving in a country that defines human, when it concerns itself with the question at all, as straight and white. We are gays and lesbians of color at a time in that country's history when its domestic and international policies, as well as its posture towards those developing nations with which we share heritage, are so reactionary that self-preservation demands we involve ourselves actively in those policies and postures. And we must have some input and effect upon those policies if we are ever to take a responsible place within the international community of peoples of color, a human community which includes 2/3 of the world's population. It is a time when the increase in conservatism upon every front affecting our lives as people of color is oppressively obvious, from the recent appointment of a Supreme Court justice in flagrant disregard of his history or racial intolerance, to the largely unprotested rise in racial stereotypes and demeaning images saturating our popular media, radio, television, videos, movies, music. We are gays and lesbians of color at a time when the advent of a new and uncontrolled disease has carved wrenching inroads into the ranks of our comrades, our lovers, our friends. And the connection between these two facts, the rise in political and social conservatism, and the appearance of what has become known in the general public's mind as the gay disease, AIDS, has not been sufficiently scrutinized. But we certainly see their unholy wedding in the increase of sanctioned and self righteous acts of heterosexism and homophobia, from queer bashing in our streets to the legal invasion of our bedrooms. Should we miss these connections between racism and homophobia, we are also asked to believe that this monstrously convenient disease, and I use convenient here in the sense of convenient for extermination, originated spontaneously and mysteriously in Africa. Yet, for all the public hysteria surrounding AIDS, almost nothing is heard of the growing incidence of CAIDS along the Mexican border, in the Near East, and in the other areas of industrial imperialism. Chemically acquired immune deficiency syndrome is an industrial disease caused by prolonged exposure to TCE. TCE is a chemical in wholesale use in the electronic sweatshops of the world, where workers are primarily people of color, in Malaysia, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, and Mexico. It is a time when we, lesbians and gays of color, cannot ignore our position as citizens of a country that stands on the wrong side of every liberation struggle on this globe. A country that publicly condones and connives with the most vicious and systematic program for genocide since Nazi Germany, apartheid South Africa. How do we raise children to deal with these realities? For if we do not, we only disarm them, send them out into the jaws of the dragon unprepared. If we raise our children in the absence of an accurate picture of the world as we know it, then we blunt their most effective weapons for survival and growth, as well as their motivation for social change. We are gays and lesbians of color in a time when race war is being fought in a small Idaho town, Coeur d'Alene. It is a time when the lynching of two Black people in California within 20 miles of each other is called non-racial and coincidental by the local media. One of the two victims was a Black gay man, Timothy Lee. The other was a Black woman reporter investigating his death, Jacqueline Peters. It is a time when local and national funds for daycare and other programs which offer help to poor and working class families are being cut. A time when even the definition of family is growing more and more restrictive. But we are having babies, and I say, thank the goddess. As members of ethnic and racial communities historically under siege, every gay and lesbian of color knows deep down inside that the question of children is not merely an academic one, nor do our children represent a theoretical hold upon some vague immortality. Our parents are examples of survival as a living pursuit, and no matter how different from them we may now find ourselves, we have built their example into our definitions of self, which is why we can be here naming ourselves. We know that all our work upon this planet is not going to be done in our lifetimes, and maybe not even in our children's lifetimes. But if we do what we came to do, our children will carry it on through their own living. And if we can keep this earth spinning and remain upon it long enough, the future belongs to us and our children, because we are fashioning it with a vision rooted in human possibility and growth, a vision that does not shrivel before adversity. There are those who say the urge to have children is a reaction to encroaching despair, a last desperate outcry before the leap into the void. I disagree. I believe that raising children is one way of participating in the future, in social change. On the other hand, it would be dangerous as well as sentimental to think that child rearing alone is enough to bring about a livable future in the absence of any definition of that future. For unless we develop some cohesive vision of that world in which we hope these children will participate, and some sense of our own responsibilities in the shaping of that world, we will only raise new performers in the master's sorry drama. So, what does this all have to do with lesbian parenting? Well, when I talk about mothering, I do so with an urgency born of my consciousness as a lesbian and a Black African Caribbean American woman staked out in white, racist, sexist, homophobic America. I gave birth to two children. I have a daughter and a son. The memory of their childhood years, storms and all, remains a joy to me. Those years were the most chaotic as well as the most creative of my life. Raising two children together with my lover, Francis, balancing the intricacies of relationship within that four-person interracial family taught me invaluable measurements for myself, my capacities, my real agendas. It gave me tangible and sometimes painful lessons about difference, about power, and about purpose. We were a Black and a white lesbian in our 40s, raising two Black children. Making do was not going to be a safe way to live our lives, nor was pretense, nor euphemism. Lesbian is a name for women who love each other. Black means of African ancestry. Our lives would never be simple. We had to learn and to teach that what works while we lived, always with a cautionary awareness of the social forces aligned against us. At the same time, there was laundry to be done, dental appointments to be kept, and no, you can't watch cartoons because we think they rot your feelings and we pay the electricity. I knew, for example, that the rage I felt and kept carefully under lock and key would one day be matched by a similar rage in my children, the rage of Black survival within the daily trivializations of white racism. I had to discover ways to own and use that rage if I was to teach them how to own and use theirs, so that we did not wind up torturing ourselves by turning our rage against each other. It was not restraint I had to learn, but ways to use my rage to fuel actions that could alter the very circumstances of oppression feeding my rage. Screaming at my daughter's childish banter instead of standing up to a racist bus driver was misplacing my anger, making her its innocent victim. Getting a migraine headache instead of injecting my Black woman's voice into the smug whiteness of a women's studies meeting was swallowing that anger, turning it against myself. Neither one of these actions offered solutions I wanted to give my children for dealing with relationships or racism. Learning to recognize and label my angers and to put them where they belonged in some effective way became crucial, not only for my own survival, but also for my children's. So that when I was justifiably angry with one of them, and no one short of sainthood can live around growing children and not get angry at one time or another, I could express the anger appropriate to the situation and not have that anger magnified and distorted by all my other unexpressed and unused furies. I was not always successful in achieving that distinction, but trying kept me conscious of the difference. If I could not learn to handle my anger, How could I expect the children to learn to handle theirs in some constructive way? Not deny it or hide it or self destruct upon it. As a Black lesbian mother, I came to realize I could not afford the energy drains of denial and still be open to my own growth. And if we did not grow with our children, they cannot learn. That was a long and sometimes arduous journey towards self possession. And that journey was sweetened by an increasing ability to stretch far beyond what I had previously thought possible, in understanding, in seeing common events in a new perspective, in trusting my own perceptions. It was an exciting journey, sweetened also by the sounds of their laughter in the street and the endearing beauties of the bodies of children sleeping. My daughter and my son made issues of survival daily questions, the answers to which had to be scrutinized as well as practiced. And what our children learned about using their own power and difference within our family, I hope they will someday use to save the world. I can hope for no less. I know that I am constantly learning from them, still. Like getting used to looking up instead of down. How looking up all the time gives you a slight ache in the back of the neck. Jonathan at 17 asking, "Hey Ma, how come you never hit us until we were bigger than you?" At that moment, realizing I guess I never hit my kids when they were little for the same reason my father never hit me, because we were afraid that our rage at the world in which we lived might leak out to contaminate and but my father never learned to express his anger beyond imaginary conversations behind closed doors. Instead, he stoppered it, denying me his image, and he died of intuit rage at 51. My mother, on the other hand, would beat me until she wept from weariness. But it was not me, the overly rambunctious child, who sold her rotting food and spat upon her and her children in the street. Francis and I wanted the children to know who we were and who they were, and that we were proud of them and of ourselves, and we hoped they would be proud of themselves and of us too. But I remember Beth's 15-year-old angry coolness. You think just because you're lesbians, you're so different from the rest of them, but you're not. You're just like all the other parents. Then she launched into a fairly accurate record of our disciplines, our demands, our errors. What I remember most of all now is that we were not just like all the other parents. Our family was not just like all the other families. That did not keep us from being a family any more than our being lesbians kept Francis and me from being parents. But we did not have to be just like all the rest in order to be valid. We were an interracial lesbian family with radical parents in the most conservative borough of New York City. Exploring the meaning of those differences kept us all stretching and learning, and we used that exploration to get us from Friday to Thursday, from toothache through homework, to who was going to babysit when we both worked late, and did Francis go to PTA meetings. There are certain basic requirements of any child: food, clothing, shelter, love. So what makes our children different? We do. Gays and lesbians of color are different because we are embattled by reason of our sexuality and our color. And if there is any lesson we must teach our children, it is that difference is a creative force for change, that survival and struggle for the future is not a theoretical issue. It is the very texture of our lives, just as revolution is the texture of the lives of the children who stuff their pockets with stones in Soweto and quick step all the way to Johannesburg to fall in the streets from tear gas and rubber bullets in front of Anglo-American corporations. Those children did not choose to die little heroes. They did not ask their mothers and fathers for permission to run in the streets and die. They do it because somewhere their parents gave them an example of what can be paid for survival, and these children carry on the same work by redefining their roles in an inhuman environment. The children of lesbians of color do not choose their color nor their mamas, but these are the facts of their lives, and the power as well as the peril of these realities must not be hidden from them as they seek self-definition. And yes, sometimes our daughter and son did pay a price for our insisting upon the articulation of our differences, political, racial, sexual. That is difficult for me to say because it hurts to raise your children knowing they may be sacrificed to your vision, your beliefs. But as children of color, lesbian parents or no, our children are programmed to be sacrifices to the vision of white, racist, profit-oriented, sexist, homophobic America, and that we cannot allow, and that we cannot allow. So if we must raise our children to be warriors rather than cannon fodder, at least let us be very clear in what war we are fighting and what inevitable shape victory will wear. Then our children will choose their own battles. Lesbians and gays of color and the children of lesbians and gays of color are in the forefront of every struggle for human dignity in this country today, and that is not by accident. At the same time, we must remember when they are children that they are children and need love, protection, and direction. From the beginning, Francis and I tried to teach the children that they each had a right to define herself and himself and to feel his own and her own feelings. They also had to take responsibility for the actions which arose out of those feelings. In order to do this teaching, we had to make sure that Beth and Jonathan had access to information from which to form those definitions, true information, no matter how uncomfortable it might be for us. We also had to provide them with sufficient space within which to feel anger, fear, rebellion, joy. We were lucky to have the love and support of other lesbians, most of whom did not have children of their own, but who loved us and our son and daughter. That support was particularly important at those times when some apparently insurmountable breach left us feeling isolated and alone as lesbian parents. Another source of support and connection came from other Black women who were raising children alone. Even so, there were times when it seemed to Francis and me that we would not survive neighborhood disapproval, a double case of chickenpox, or escalating teenage rebellion. It is really scary when your children take what they have learned about self-assertion and nonviolent power and decide to test it in confrontations with you. But that is a necessary part of learning themselves. And the primary question is, have they learned to use it well? Our daughter and son are in their 20s now. They are both warriors and the battlefield shift. The war is the same. It stretches from the brothels of Southeast Asia to the blood-ridden alleys of Cape Town, to the incinerated lesbian in Berlin, to Michael Stewart's purloined eyes and grandmother Eleanor Burper's shot dead in the projects of New York. It stretches from the classroom where our daughter teaches Black and Latino third graders to chant, "I am somebody beautiful," to the college campus where our son replaced the stars and stripes with the flag of South Africa to protest his school's refusal to divest. They are in the process of choosing their own weapons, and no doubt some of those weapons will feel completely alien to me. Yet I trust them deeply because they were raised to be their own woman, their own man, in struggle and in the service of all our futures. That's Audre Lorde, in case you had a doubt. A Burst of Light and Other Essays. Audre Lorde wrote, originally these essays were collected, what did we say? We just looked this up, 1977? What did we look up? Is that about right with the AIDS references? 1988. Originally published in 1988. This copy is republished in 2018. Happy to have it on our shelves at the Island Free Library. Available for checkout if you'd like. Send us an email, islandfreelibrary@gmail.com, to reserve any of the books in our collection. This one, again, is called A Burst of Light and Other Essays. Audre Lorde. Happy Gay Pride, everybody. Peace.